His laughter. That's the first thing that sticks with me. A booming, arrogant sound cutting through the crackling campfire as he recounted a story of teenage cruelty so profound, so utterly heartless, that it sent a chill down my spine. He was laughing about ruining a boy's life. That night, under the guise of a birthday celebration, I knew his surprise wouldn't be a cake. It would be a carefully crafted taste of his own medicine. Have you ever felt that sickening wave of disbelief when someone reveals a truly ugly side? Have you ever wished you could deliver a dose of much needed karma? If the answer is yes, then you've come to the right place. Hit that subscribe button for more tales of Reddit revenge, where justice, however controversial, finds a way. Like this video if you believe some actions have long-lasting consequences. And let's dive into the story of Thomas and the birthday surprise he never saw coming. My name is, your YouTube channel name, and this story comes to us from a user on Reddit who experienced a birthday weekend that took a dark and unexpected turn. Our protagonist, let's call her Sarah, was 26 years old and in the exciting early stages of dating a 28-year-old man named Thomas. By all accounts, Thomas seemed like a catch: sweet, educated, intelligent, and good-looking. After 7 weeks of what Sarah described as a promising courtship, Thomas invited her to his father's country house in a small French town for a long weekend celebrating his upcoming 29th birthday. Two of his childhood friends, Alex and Bart, would also be there, and Sarah was looking forward to meeting everyone, especially Thomas's father. The first day, a Friday, went smoothly. Sarah found herself enjoying the company of Thomas's father, describing him as a smart and caring man. It seemed like everything was falling into place. Saturday was equally pleasant, filled with daytime activities culminating in a lively garden party with neighbors and Thomas's local friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. But as the evening wore on and the drinks flowed freely, the mood took a sharp, unsettling turn. As the night deepened, a group gathered around a small campfire, the flickering flames casting long shadows and creating an intimate, almost confessional atmosphere. This was when the innocent sharing of childhood memories morphed into something deeply disturbing. At first, the stories were the typical silly anecdotes you'd expect: clumsy mishaps, childish pranks, the usual nostalgic fare. But then Thomas and his two childhood friends, Alex and Bart, began to recount something far more sinister. They started to reminisce about their time in middle school, around the ages of 14 or 15. And what they found so amusing to share was the story of how they had systematically bullied a classmate named Arthur for nearly 6 months. Sarah listened in growing horror as they casually recounted their cruelty: the relentless teasing, the hurtful nicknames, the constant barrage of verbal abuse that they had directed at this boy who was, by their own admission, already isolated and shy. But the story didn't end there. It escalated into something far more calculated and emotionally damaging. Thomas and his friends revealed with twisted amusement how they had created a fake girl profile on MSN Messenger, a popular instant messaging platform from the early 2000s. For months, just let that sink in, months, they had maintained this fictitious online persona, using it to engage with Arthur, flirting with him, building a false sense of connection and the phantom relationship. They even used pictures of Bart's real cousin to make the illusion more believable. Imagine Arthur, this shy, lonely teenager, finally believing he had found someone who cared about him, someone he could confide in. He poured his heart out, sending love messages and personal confessions to this digital mirage. And all the while, Thomas, Alex, and Bart were laughing behind his back, sharing his private words with others at school, turning his vulnerability into a cruel spectacle. Then came the final, devastating act. When they grew bored with their manipulative game, they decided to orchestrate a fake in-person meeting. They instructed Arthur to take a bus for 2 or 3 hours, telling him to wear an Elmer the Elephant t-shirt, apparently based on some private joke they shared among themselves. The image of this young, hopeful boy making that long journey only to arrive and find no one waiting for him is truly heartbreaking. We can only imagine the confusion, the crushing disappointment, the dawning realization that he had been so cruelly deceived. If Arthur hadn't already figured out the monstrous prank, any lingering doubt was erased the next day at school. Thomas and Bart, with a complete lack of empathy, gleefully recounted the entire story to everyone, even sharing the private love messages that Arthur had written. The impact on Arthur was immediate and devastating. He stopped attending classes and eventually transferred to a different school. The emotional trauma he must have endured is unimaginable. And the most sickening part? As Sarah listened to this appalling tale, she looked for any sign of remorse, any flicker of regret in Thomas, Alex, or Bart. There was none. In fact, they seemed to revel in their past cruelty, even joking that they weren't evil enough to convince Arthur to send nude or sexually explicit pictures. The casualness with which they discussed this, the utter lack of empathy for the pain they inflicted, was truly chilling. Sarah was beyond uncomfortable. She was horrified. In that moment, her perception of Thomas shattered. The sweet, charming man she thought she knew revealed a deeply disturbing capacity for cruelty. She wasn't the only one affected. Thomas's own father, who had overheard the latter part of the story, wore a look of profound disappointment and shame. His stupid son, however, was too drunk to even notice the palpable shift in the atmosphere. Sarah made her excuses and retreated to the house, the joyful spirit of the weekend completely extinguished. Sleep offered no escape that night. Sarah's mind raced, replaying the horrific story and Thomas's callous laughter. She couldn't reconcile the man she had been getting to know with the cruel teenager he had been. She heard him stumble into bed around 4 a.m., but she feigned sleep, unable to face him. Sunday was Thomas's actual birthday. The original plan was for Sarah to take him on a surprise one-on-one lunch date, followed by a larger afternoon party. But Sarah had made a different plan. She woke up early, silently gathered her belongings, and slipped out of the country house. She made her way to the train station and boarded the first direct train back to Paris. Once on the train, a plan began to form in her mind. She sent a text message to Thomas, wishing him a happy birthday. She told him that she had a special surprise planned for lunch at a certain location about an hour and a half away from the country house. She explained that she needed to go ahead to make sure everything was perfect and instructed him to meet her there. She had chosen the location randomly using Google Maps, buying herself precious time. Thomas, still likely nursing a hangover, didn't read the message until around 10 a.m. He responded with enthusiastic anticipation, promising to follow her instructions to the letter. When he arrived at the initially designated location at 12:30 p.m., Sarah texted him saying there was a slight delay and asked him to wait a little longer. Then she shifted the location, instructing him to meet her at a restaurant a 30-minute drive from where he was. By 1:15 p.m., Thomas had arrived at the second location. Sarah sent another text saying she was on her way, would arrive in about 20 minutes, and that she would understand the delays when she saw her. She also casually asked him to order some food and the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. Around 1:30 p.m., his calls started coming in, followed by a flurry of worried text messages. 45 minutes later, Sarah finally responded, sending a short, brutal message in French. So, how does it feel to have people play with your feelings? And then, she went silent. She let his calls and texts flood her phone for the rest of the afternoon, never once replying. At some point, an unknown number called. It was Alex, Thomas's friend, frantic and angry. He demanded to know what was going on, accusing Sarah of ruining Thomas's birthday. Her response was cold and direct. "This is an extremely small payback for what you did to Arthur. Tell Thomas to stop calling me." And with that, she hung up and blocked both their numbers. Despite the calculated nature of her actions, Sarah admitted that she felt a pang of sadness that evening. She had, after all, started to develop feelings for Thomas. The following days brought further complications. A mutual friend contacted her expressing the opinion that her reaction was completely absurd and unfair. They argued that it wasn't her place to punish someone for teenage actions, that there were more adult ways of handling things, and that she had overreacted drastically. Surprisingly, the majority of their shared acquaintances seemed to agree, labeling her as a bitch. Thomas, for his part, made several attempts to reconcile,
sending messages and trying to win her back for months. Sarah remained resolute, never responding to any of his attempts. Looking back, Sarah has no regrets. She felt a sense of justice, however imperfect, had been served. Her only lingering thought is for Arthur, who would now be in his mid-30s. She hopes he is well and has overcome the trauma inflicted upon him by 3 cruel teenagers. Interestingly, Sarah later added an update about Thomas's father. Contrary to the opinion of their mutual friends, he was one of the few people who understood her actions. He called her shortly after the incident, ostensibly to discuss something unrelated, but he was already aware of everything that had happened. He didn't speak ill of his son, but Sarah could clearly sense his disappointment. He confessed that he had barely slept the night after hearing the story. He told Sarah that he had enjoyed meeting her and regretted that she and Thomas were no longer together, but he also explicitly stated that he understood her reasons. He made no attempt to persuade her to give Thomas another chance. By all accounts, Thomas's father seemed like a true gentleman, a stark contrast to his son's behavior. Sarah also addressed the question of reaching out to Arthur. She doesn't even know his last name. She felt that even if she did, contacting him after so many years might be more harmful than helpful, potentially forcing him to relive a painful chapter of his life that he likely wants to forget. She can only hope that he has grown into a confident and happy man, and perhaps in a small corner of her mind, she hopes he still has a fondness for Elmer the elephant. So, what did Thomas experience on his birthday? He was likely confused, then increasingly frustrated and worried as Sarah's instructions led him on a wild goose chase. The moment her true intentions were revealed with that single text message, the realization must have hit him like a ton of bricks. He, for the first time, experienced what it felt like to have his emotions toyed with, to be led on with false hope, to be left waiting and wondering. It was a taste of the humiliation and distress that Arthur endured, albeit on a much smaller scale and without the years of emotional manipulation. The ruined birthday, the concerned and likely angry calls from his friends, the radio silence from Sarah, all served as a consequence for his past actions, actions he had recounted with such chilling nonchalance just the night before. While some might argue that Sarah's revenge was disproportionate or misdirected, it's hard to deny the poetic justice in making him feel a fraction of the emotional turmoil he and his friends inflicted on Arthur. Sarah's emotional state after delivering her revenge was complex. She felt bad, acknowledging the attachment she had formed with Thomas, but ultimately her sense of moral outrage and her empathy for Arthur outweighed her personal feelings. She stood by her actions, finding solace in the hope that she had, in some small way, avenged the pain of a long-forgotten victim. This story sparks a difficult question. What is the statute of limitations on past cruelty? Do people deserve to be held accountable for the hurtful things they did as teenagers, especially when those actions had lasting negative impacts on others? While Sarah's methods were unconventional and drew criticism, her actions highlight the enduring consequences of our choices and the profound impact that bullying can have on a young person's life. What do you think of Sarah's revenge? Was it justified or did she cross a line? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found this story compelling, and subscribe for more gripping tales of Reddit revenge and human psychology. What's the most satisfying act of karmic justice that you've ever witnessed? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching.